Welcome to this Roundup. While the digital global age has been upon us, the COVID 19 pandemic has accelerated the need for digital transformation. The ongoing pandemic has revealed how vulnerable each component of a nation is and how digital technologies and infrastructure are becoming a survival necessity. To be operational, sustainable, and survive, the only option for organization is to accelerate the digital transformation. Now, since the digital technologies and infrastructure have become fundamental for our very survival, security, and sustainability, it is important that we discuss this and evaluate what is necessary for us to take the next steps. To discuss this further, I'm delighted to welcome Jeff Roberts to this roundup. Jeff is the founder of Innovation Vista and is based in the United States. Welcome, Jeff. We're honored to have you on this roundup.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be able to join. I appreciate the invitation.
Thank you, Jeff. So, amidst the COVID 19 pandemic, what do you see? What is the road to digital transformation in your assessment?
Yeah, it's certainly changed because of COVID, no question, or at least it's sped up. I think that a lot of companies now have come to the realization of how important technology communications are to their own internal capabilities and their ability to function. That's a little bit easier, I think, than connecting with customers and clients, which has a lot more challenge and where our standards are a little higher. But on the internal collaboration, we're meeting over Zoom. I think millions of people around the world have gotten used to video conferencing now. They've gotten used to collaborating on cloud and sharing documents. We're probably at a point that without COVID would have taken us 3 to 5 years to reach with this level of electronic communication and collaboration. What's really interesting is that next level. When you think about customers and clients, it's not as simple as just throwing Zoom calls out on the calendar and having that solve everything. So for real business to be conducted, there's a lot more work yet to do.
Yes, absolutely. And I think you made a very important point that the technology communications, is at the core right now, the beginning of the transformation. Because yes, while, we had all these technology available, like, Zoom and Google Meet and Skype and all of them, not everyone was comfortable using it, or not everyone was prioritizing to use that as a, mode of communication, because, in-person meetings were always preferred, and so people were traveling all over the world and using that in-person communication. But now COVID-19 has fundamentally changed everything. People cannot travel anymore, so yes, communication, the digital communication, the using this technology, Zoom and Meet and Skype and all of them are picking up. There is no doubt about that. But that is only for communication. Where else do you see the transformation imminent because of this COVID-19 beyond this communication, for the organizations to be able to survive and be sustainable in their, whatever products and services they are offering, today, and they may want to offer in the coming tomorrow?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's communication is only the beginning, for sure. And to your point, to really conduct business, we have to connect with our customers, and we have to enable them to do business with us in new ways. These might have been optional in the past. Certainly, people are used to making purchases on Amazon.com. They're used to getting their entertainment over the internet with Netflix and Hulu and so forth. But real business in all of the industries in which that occurs takes more than that. And I think there are huge numbers of industries that we're very much relying on face-to-face contact still. The retail industry is an obvious choice. How many storefronts are there The reason there are storefronts is because people were used to and wanted to go into a store to see what was available on the shelf, what different things cost. They wanted to touch them. They wanted to see them. In the case of clothing, they wanted to try them on. They wanted that, and now they don't, or they want it certainly less so. And there's a huge group of customers that feel very uncomfortable and unsafe going to a storefront now. So that is a enormous sea change in the mind of the customer. And so a lot of the client conversations I'm having right now are around this disruption. And for companies that did not have much of an online presence, they didn't have much of a way for people on their mobile device to interact with them. They didn't have a way to order electronically and then have it delivered or picked up curbside. These companies are really struggling. And in some cases, I wrote an article calling it a catch-22, because the businesses that don't yet have those technologies in place are suffering because of that. And the suffering itself actually keeps them from having the funds available and the confidence to invest those funds to build the capabilities that they really need. So I think another thing we will begin to see if this pandemic continues to stretch on is a huge wave of M&A activity, where businesses are consolidated to those that have a good technology platform that's viable in the pandemic age. I think you will see businesses sell while they still have viable business models, viable customer lists, viable inventories of product and services, et cetera, because they're going to need to in order to survive. You think about if this goes on for several years, where people have to wear masks and there's not a vaccine, maybe not a viable treatment for some period of time, I think we will see an enormous wave of disruption. So in my consulting practice, this is the wave I'm trying to get in front of and to help my clients see very clearly and be ready for.
Yes, no, I hear your point, because while there is still an opportunity, it's better to exit the business that you feel that you are not prepared with the technology models or digitization or transformation that is essential to transform and adapt, adjust and adapt for the digital age. So it's better to get acquired by the organizations that are ready, and they can still use your value chain. They can use your clients and they can use your products and services. So that is that is a very interesting point, that you are seeing that already happening, because like you said, we don't know when this COVID-19 pandemic is going to be over, or when we will be able to have effective therapy or treatment, preventive or therapeutic treatments that can allow us to give some sort of comfort level to go out of the house, to go and touch things, or to be able to live the normal life that we all are used to. So in a time when we need to be alert, adjust, adapt, and create new opportunities for ourselves and our organizations, for our very survival and security, how do you see, other than the merger and acquisition that you are already seeing happening in the markets, how do you see the digital initiative shaping the transformation? Because yes, we know that communication is a first step, and connecting to your clients, and that is also ongoing. But where else do you see the digital initiatives shaping the transformation?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we have to enable customers to do business with us electronically. We mentioned that earlier. That's sort of an obvious one. Businesses that don't have viable website and mobile alternatives are going to need those. Secondly, I think there's an enormous opportunity, business to business in particular, with automation and integration. Web services, APIs, A lot of these tools have been around, and the architectures that make them work securely have been around for a long time. But the pressure and the real need for those kinds of connections didn't exist because we had the inertia of the previous business model. Everyone was going into work. People were making business travel trips to clients and so forth. And so that need for it didn't exist the way it does now. So in many ways, we're fortunate that this pandemic hit when it did, because we have proven technologies that we can now bring to bear on the situation. I shudder to think if this had happened in the 80s or the 90s, where there was nothing like that in place, we would have been just really handicapped as a society. But as it is, it's a disruption enough because so many companies don't have those connections in place to their suppliers, partners, clients. They require phone calls and business meetings and signed contracts with pen and ink and so forth and so on in order to do their business, or they have a physical, an inventory and physical requirement and presence for how they operate. So I think, all of those things, I think it looks different in different industries, but I think most of the building blocks are there. I think the main thing that this calls for that I'm finding is not happening 100% of the time yet is just the realization in the minds of leadership that this will last long enough. It won't last forever, but this pandemic will last long enough that it can kill their business.
Yes.
And I think when leadership has come to that realization, if they have deep pockets, they make the investments, and that's that's a nice position for them to be in. If they don't have the deep pockets, the small and medium-sized businesses, which are my typical clientele, often don't have the deep pockets to put in place all the things that they realize now that they need. Outside of M&A, I think there's an opportunity for private equity investment. I think injecting capital into businesses that are really viable or will be viable with these technology capabilities added on, I think that's a fantastic opportunity for private equity groups, maybe a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity potentially to buy in at very compelling terms into businesses that, to fund these digital and technology investments, that then on the other side of those investments, will be extremely successful. And those that do it better than their competitors, honestly, are in a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity maybe to disrupt their industry. So I'm trying to get clients that are in that space that they don't have what they need. If their competitors also don't have what they need, it might be a fantastic opportunity. And we just need to find the path. We need to find the way out of the forest, whether that's with their own money, potentially with debt. If they have access to debt and bond markets at this point, rates are historically low for that. It's never made more sense to borrow money to make these kind of investments.
Yes.
But even if they don't have that access, I think the private equity industry is aware. I know they are. I've spoken to multiple people in that space that are very aware of these opportunities and are ready to inject that capital and to really turbocharge the right businesses that catch this vision.
Yes, I hear your point, and I can see why they are interested in moving in that direction. And the point that you made about decision makers not able to make up their mind whether they should invest in the digital technologies or they should get acquired, or depending on how long this is going to last, that confusion is still there because nobody knows. I mean, tomorrow it can just disappear, or it could go on for several years, and we may come up with a vaccine that may work or may not work. So there are a lot of questions, emerging. So we are just not sure how this is going to go forward. So for businesses and decision makers, obviously, it is very difficult for them to make that decision on the strategy, and that plays a key role in the transformation, the roadmap to digital transformation. Because if you don't if you're not sure what strategy you can apply or you can define to move forward, then it's very difficult, and especially for small and mid-sized business owners, like you were just talking about. This is a very challenging time and decisive time for them, to take the next step. So the
Yeah.
what the industries that we see, I mean, there are many industries each nation has, where their economy depends on. If we look at United States, from healthcare to defense industry to telecommunication industry, and every other industry, retail and commerce, we are seeing some of the industries we have already seen significant, enormous transformation, especially the commerce, e-commerce. We have Amazons and we have, Instacart. So as far as we, are concerned, going to for groceries, is no longer a challenge, because we just place an order on Instacart or any other, digital application that allows you to do that. And we are able to manage that without going out of the house. Same for Uber Eats and getting the orders from the restaurant. So there are many industries that had sort of preparation, not by themselves but by third party applications, by having those applications that allowed us to immediately quickly transition to those industries, services how we want it, without stepping out of the house. But there are plenty of industries like energy industries and many other industries where you have to go, some defense industries, you have to go to the workplace. You need certain sort of environment to work there. What kind of initiatives do you see emerging for such industries where working remotely it's not an option at all?
You're right. And in those industries, I think the focus has turned very much so to protection, to tracking information about their employees and their locations and who has been in the same room at the same time, so that 2 weeks later, if someone comes up positive for COVID-19, they can go back in time and they can understand exactly who that person interacted with. So I don't want to recommend specific solutions, but there are some very, very innovative platforms out there that software companies have developed mobile apps for checking in, tracking, certainly a possibility. Who's in the room, who's in the building at the same time, what floor are people in, what time of day. I think that's certainly part of the answer for companies in that place. The other aspects, I think, are actual physical changes to the facilities. And you see a lot of fiberglass shields going up to further divide work areas where it's never been an issue in the past that people are 4 feet, 3 feet away from each other. Now that's not enough. And so where it's not possible to spread people out further, you see these divisions going up. They can still see through them, they can still talk, but that protection of just trying to enable that social distancing in tighter spaces. I think that's part of the answer. It's also, technology has a role to play even for those businesses. I've had some interesting conversations around robotic process automation for particular functions that are happening at a particular time and place. If it's possible to build a technology answer to some of those functions, and you don't need a person there, or you don't need them there as long or as frequently, maybe that opens up a door to shift scheduling, where you can avoid an overlap of people being in the same place at the same time. it's endless, the creativity that we can apply to these challenges. Again, I'm thankful that we have some of the building blocks in place. You mentioned some, supporting restaurants with the Uber Eats and the Grubhub sort of services that were there as an option. Now they're becoming the primary delivery mechanism in a lot of these instances. So in many ways, I know there's a lot to be said about. Believe me, I grieve for the lifestyle that we have all left behind and miss many aspects of that, not least of which is sports, all the time. But there are other aspects of this that really we're blessed in many ways, that we came into this at the time that we did, with the technology platform and options that we did, that we do have those building blocks. And so, I think it's healthier always to try to take a positive view to certainly we want to be, cognizant that this is first and foremost a personal health crisis. Business is important, but it's certainly not more important than life and health.
Yes, absolutely.
Although on the flip side, in some ways, business supports and enables life and health and people's well-being. And so, that seeing what's here and looking at the bright side, or the silver lining in the cloud, if you will, there are some things about this moment that are positive, that give us some options, that give us a way out of the forest. Like I said earlier, that analogy is very fitting, I think, that, we're not going to be trapped here helpless, but it requires a vision. And you talked about strategy. I talk about strategy for a living, technology strategy specifically, but this is a moment when strategy of all kinds has never been more important, more challenged, but also has never had the opportunity to make the kind of difference that it does right now. Because companies and leaders that navigate these waters well, versus mediocre versus poorly, that spread of impact is enormously wide. I think more so than any other time in our history. I think businesses could be mediocre in some ways in the past. Their strategy could be mediocre. They could get by because times were good and everyone was sort of thriving. Now, it really is a time when the innovation, those with the vision and the strategy, and who can step out above the day-to-day and look at where we're headed, not just where we are,
Yes.
They will be rewarded.
Yes, absolutely. I know I hear your point, and you made some very good points about, that we are blessed that we have these building blocks, ready, that can assist us to take the next steps. But there are many countries. We are not talking about just the United States. There are many countries, where the digital infrastructure is not at a level where it should be for them to take this opportunity or take this crisis, personal health crisis or human health crisis, and take this opportunity to transform and adopt the digital mode of life, digital mode of operation. So for many countries and for many industries, it is still not possible because they were not prepared. Their infrastructure was not prepared. So it is not just our strategy or our desire to adapt quickly, to adopt, or start applying the digital technologies and go for the digital transformation and visualize and imagine, what we want to change and how we can redefine and visualize, how, what kind of products we can have now, what kind of services we can provide, and how we can create new models, new systems, new way of operations, new way of life. That is not possible for everyone, every country, or every decision maker, or every industry. So that is still a challenge. So as what kind of complex challenges you see, not just for the United States, but for all the rest of the countries that are out there, who are trying to survive this COVID-19 crisis, because COVID-19 is a global crisis. It's not just a, United States crisis. It started in China, and then, now we are seeing it has become a pandemic. Every country is impacted, and not only the COVID-19 virus, but there are also reports of, some other viruses emerging, or there is a fear of, other viruses jumping from animals to, humans. So this is probably, let's hope this is not just the beginning with this COVID-19 virus, and that more viruses and more bacteria can create, some more complex challenges for human species. But it looks like we are in a very difficult time. So
Yeah.
where do you see the business leaders, if we just focus on the businesses, where do you see them facing complex challenges? Of course, other than the, health challenges that all their employees are facing, because as we witnessed, the supply chains were also almost broken and disrupted, not disrupted, broken, when the COVID-19 began.
Yeah. It's great points that you're making there, and it is certainly a global challenge. I think those of us that live in countries that have very reliable electric power and internet connectivity, we really are blessed and in some ways spoiled. I think you're absolutely right to point out other nations are not blessed with the same infrastructure. I would encourage, the leaders in those nations, there's certain prudent protection investing in defense, right? You want to have an armed force to defend your nation. I think in the pandemic age that we're in, electricity and internet connectivity could rise to that level, because you're talking about potentially life and death, to be able to get the information that they need to have in order to know what protections are possible, to get supplies that they need, etc. So I would hope that awareness would build in the third world, where power is either non-existent, or you have many parts of the world where power is not available all day long. There's a rotation, there's a schedule where the electricity will come on certain hours of the day. So I think in those areas, making the investments to build that infrastructure could be just as strategic as funding their military. And in many ways, the very most important thing that those leaders might do right now, not only for today, but as a strategic investment, to realize the world will change. The world is changing, and at a much quicker rate as a result of COVID than anyone expected to see. So even on the other side of this, there is a treatment, let's say, or maybe a potential vaccine. Their nations are not going to be able to function in the same way that they were before. And I think in many ways, without a ongoing infrastructure that enables connection to the internet, those nations would be further handicapped. So I would love to see that. I know there are some initiatives underway with very large tech firms putting up internet solutions up into the, or orbiting the Earth, and satellite internet solutions and so forth. There are a lot of innovative ideas around that. I think that what I hope to see also is an awareness that electric power is a significant part of the equation as well. Certainly, computers and mobile devices have become very much commodities now. The cost of those items has just gone down so significantly, and the power versus the cost is just unbelievable what we see with Moore's law. But without power and the ability to connect to the internet, many countries in the world are not going to have the benefits of that. So, I hope to see that. I hope that we don't see a further widening of the gap between the first world and the third world because of COVID. If we do see that, I hope that the wealthy nations will take the steps they need to take, and make an investment in the rest of the world, because it would pay off significantly.
That is an excellent point. So, speaking about the investment, do you see the investment happening globally? The merger acquisition, initially, in the beginning, you talked about the merger acquisition activity picking up. Do you see that as a global trend, or do you see that only in the United States?
No, I think it is. I think it's global. I think so many of these things, it varies very widely. The approach that countries have taken, the seriousness with which they're taking this, the level they were hit. If you think on a spectrum from New Zealand and Brazil, on two ends of the spectrum, right? I mean, think about the difference, what they've done, how hard they've been hit, what the impact is on their people, on their healthcare system, and ultimately their way of life. So there is a variety, but I think the awareness is, we've never been of one mind before as the entire world more than now. And we have the ability to communicate with each other more than ever before. To be hit with something, all of us, at the same time, and even with that variety of responses, I think COVID-19 is the topic that everyone is speaking about across the world, and I hope to see more what we see in academia, in the pharmaceutical industry, where there's some partnership and real sharing of information across borders and across companies that is just really unprecedented, that people realize, I think, that we're in this together.
Yes.
And yes, there are certain intellectual property protections and so forth that are probably appropriate, and we don't want people who invest billions of dollars to have their ideas stolen. All that is true. At the same time, until we figure this out, no one has the answer. And until we figure it out, I think the healthiest approach we can take is to really think globally and to share this information, use the technology capabilities that we do have. And I think we're seeing that. So I'm encouraged by much of that. And I think with the firepower that we have trained on this at this point, I don't know about the viability of a vaccine. I'm not trained in that at all. I certainly have heard what others have heard, that it's difficult in this particular class of virus to make a vaccine. But I don't lose heart just because of that, because I think, I often say that if we find the Tamiflu equivalent for COVID, we're there, we're fine. I think even just that, ameliorating the symptoms, giving people a confidence that if they get this, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to end up in the hospital.
Absolutely.
That they can be okay. They'll recover. There's not a pill to take that knocks it out. Okay. But if there's a treatment that softens it, and just that, I think would be enough. And I think we could go back to having confidence, being together, so forth and so on. I'm optimistic on the long term that with this much firepower across the world being trained on this, we will come up with an answer. And the other part of the conversations I'm having with my clients is, let's be ready. At the same time as we say this could take a while, we also have to think it won't be forever. And so, we'll never go back to the world we had before, but let's be ready for the world we're in now. And let's be ready for the next world that we know will retain a lot of these changes that we've put in place. There will be more remote work. That is just unanimously acknowledged, I think, for the efficiency that it offers, the cost savings that it offers, the space savings, all of those reasons. I think that many things are here to stay, even on the other side. So that's the good news, really. Innovation and building these capabilities pays off, and it pays off not only to live today, but to really thrive in the future.
Yes, absolutely. No, I have seen on your point about coming up with an effective, solution like Tamiflu. There is no doubt that we will come up with something like that. There are many encouraging, initiatives that are going through, trials, and we will, irrespective of whether we get a successful vaccine or not, we will have a treatment, in the coming months or hopefully, year. So there is a encouraging sign, so we should be all feeling hopeful about that, and we have to be hopeful. But there are, while remote work is picking up, there are, a lot of challenges there as well, that as we have seen in Silicon Valley, the gig economy, it's almost collapsing. People are moving out also, because if you are allowed to work from anywhere, why do you need to be in Silicon Valley, where you can hardly get one room in, a few $1,000s. So it's a lot of changes are going to come with these, remote work policies that organizations are forced to adapt right now. So we will see, how this transition and transformation is going to impact several different industries, especially the commercial real estate and even the residential real estate. So there are many challenges going on. So having said that, what would you like to tell our global viewers and listeners, especially about your initiatives, your involvement, and your work that you are trying to do, and whether if they need your kind of services, how they can reach you?
No, I appreciate that very much. My primary focus is to help companies make the most of their technology and have the right strategy to fully empower their organization and to really monetize those investments, not just to automate what they do to maybe improve their margins, but really to go beyond that level and say, let's use technology to impact the top line. Let's use technology to win business from our competitors. Let's use it to do more business with our existing customers. And that looks a little different in different industries, but that's my focus. Really, I think in many ways, COVID has changed the game. In many ways, it's made what I do even more exciting. And as I mentioned before, the impact of the right strategy has never been higher than it is right now.
Yes.
And the spread between those that have the right strategy and those that have a vision for building these capabilities that will bear fruit for many, many years to come, versus those that want to stick their head in the sand and say, we can't afford to do anything, surely something will happen where we'll be able to go back to normal very soon. Leadership that is thinking that way, it's been well said that hope is not a strategy.
Yes.
And so I'm spending a lot of time trying to encourage leaders. I understand it's scary. I understand that they may not feel like they have money to invest in these things. It was not planned. And their revenues are often down versus what they were before. All of that is happening. That makes it even more challenging. But that's really where you want to get creative, like we talked about before, with equity injections, with debt and the bond market being what it is right now, because those things are more of an option than ever. And the impact of these kinds of investments has never been bigger.
Yes.
So I, in many ways, I think we're poised for very exciting time. I hope that the personal and the health tragedies that so many are suffering right now will be solved very, very soon, as soon as possible. But while we're working through that, and while those in healthcare and research work on that, I think there's work for those of us in business and technology to do, to really improve ourselves and position ourselves for success. So to contact me, my website is innovationvista.com. We have articles out there and summaries about our services and our approach. Again, in many ways, it looks different for us in different businesses and different industries, but these same tools are in the toolkit. The building blocks are there, like we talked about before. And so I encourage anyone who's on the fence about, maybe this is the time to play some offense, not defense. Maybe this is the time to make an investment and build something to ensure the viability of their business going forward versus sticking their head in the sand and hoping that this passes quickly. I don't think it's passing quickly. And even if it does, the world on the other side of that is going to look nothing like what we have come out of. And that's sad in many ways, but it's also opportunity in many ways for those that can have a vision for what the future will be. And as always, there will be good and there will be bad, and there will be things that we miss and that we grieve that because of the pandemic, we're no longer together physically as often, and things like that, I'm sure will happen. On the other side, I think there will be things we're very happy about. And in many cases, I think people are spending more time with their families than they ever have before, more times in their communities, and not getting in a car or getting on a train and going into the city center for their livelihood and then coming home when it's dark. There are a lot of good that will come alongside the bad, and that's the journey of life, right? So we're just trying to be a part of it and trying to help companies with this aspect of where technology can really move the needle for them. So innovationvista.com. I'm active on LinkedIn. Happy to interact with anyone who would like to talk further about anything we've discussed.
Wonderful. No, you are absolutely right that, this is a time of not just, being hopeful, but it's time for strategy. We have to visualize, come up with new ideas, new imagination of new way of doing things. But, while we are all suffering, this is a health crisis, we should not forget that pandemics are portal to evolution. Human species, we most of our genome, almost half of our genome has come from viruses. So viruses, this pandemic, the virus behind it is also likely going to leave behind something for humans, and it may end up, strengthening our species. So we all have to be very hopeful for that and for our coming tomorrow. Irrespective of when this is over, we have to be prepared so that we don't, go through this kind of challenges of lack of preparation, so that we can have easy transition no matter what happens. So thank you so much, Jeff, for participating in this roundup today. We appreciate your thoughtful insight on COVID-19 and road to digital transformation, and our global viewers and listeners would benefit tremendously from the information you provided today. So even if a single decision maker can understand the need for the digital transformation, after listening to this discussion, this risk roundup dialogue has been of service, and we thank you for that.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been great talking with you.
Great talking with you as well. So thank you so much. Risk Group is a strategic security risk research platform and community, and our ecosystem is the first and only cross-disciplinary and collective community that is made of top scientists, security professionals, thought leaders, entrepreneurs, philanthropists, policymakers, and academic institutions from across nations, collaborating to research, review, rate, and report strategic security risks to protect the future of humanity. Add your voice to risk groups. Get involved to protect the future of our species. Until next time, I'm Jayashree, host of Risk Roundup, signing off. See you next time. Thank you.